So we have a situation dealing with shear flexible deformation theory for bending of beams, where we allow not only the flexural deformations but also admit the possibility of shear deformations. And when we admit the possibility of shear deformations, then the slope of the transverse deflected shape need not be same as the section rotation. And the difference between the slope of deflected shape, transverse deflection, and the section rotation is what is the shear strain. And we get, once we develop that and establish the equilibrium equations, we find that the shear deformation theory can be described by a couple simultaneous equations. Second order differential equations, two second order differential equations which are coupled together through their unknowns, that is the section rotation theta and the transverse displacement v. Right. So there are second order differential equation individually, but obviously they cannot be solved independent of each other. So they have to be treated in combination together as simultaneous equations. And once we develop the weak form and we can infer, developing the weak form of this weighted residual statement, we can subsequently infer that the highest order of derivative in the weak form is of 1, first order derivative, and the primary variable are just the section rotations and the transverse displacement, and both of them are treated independently. So there is only C0 continuity of primary variables are required. So primary variables in this case being transverse displacement V and the section rotation theta, treated independent of each other. So C0 continuity is required and highest order derivative being 1. So a linear, first order derivative should exist, and that means linear interpolation should be an adequate approximation, right, to begin with. So this is the weak form that we developed for primary variable as a section rotation. The second equation leads to another set of weak form of the second equation, that is in terms of transverse displacement as the primary variable. And the inference drawn is similar in the sense that the highest order derivative is 1 and primary variable is 0th order derivative. Primary variable appears as a native function, native variable without any derivatives. So C0 continuity of primary variable is required, and since the first order derivative is involved, so linear interpolation should be fine to begin with, right? So now based on that we come up, we develop the approximations, linear interpolation using first degree polynomial interpolation. Lagrange interpolation formula are very convenient and they can be developed very easily, and the approximation can be derived as linear interpolation between two values at the nodes. So Vi Ni and theta I Ni, summation over I. And then we substitute this in the weak form and evaluate the integrals and choose the weighting function as Ni and Nj in sequence, and we get 4 equations for 4 unknowns, that is Vi theta I and Vj theta j, and those will be the equations of equilibrium, right? And this is what we have. So this is the first equation from the first equation, and similarly repeating the process we can get the other equations. So eventually we will end up with a system of linear simultaneous equations of the familiar form K U is equal to F. So that is the element level equilibrium equation, and we can superimpose on top of this the stress behavior, and that will become the element of frame element, capable of modeling axial deformation as well as transverse deformation and the section rotations. And the problem can be solved using this element equilibrium equation and for the total analysis, plane frame. The equations, the problem in three-dimensional space frame, three-dimensional geometry is similar, except that it brings a little more complication, more variable and more deformation. In addition to axial rigidity, we also have twisting action coming in, and then we have two-axis bending and so on. So the principal axis may be different. So flexural rigidity needs to be defined in two orthogonal directions or three orthogonal directions and so on. And shear rigidity will also differ. So it's only a matter of detail, but in principle the basic idea remains the same. So there is nothing very different as far as three-dimensional modeling is concerned. So now we have discussed this problem that we allowed a more generalized formulation for beam, in that we accommodated the possibility of shear deformation, and we ended up with a very simple interpolation model, right? It's only C0 continuity, and which is very easy to develop, and no what should I say, kind of involved lengthy derivations for that are involved in the formulation of cubic Hermite interpolation. If you don't remember the Hermite interpolation formula, then obviously it has to be derived using the constraints that are imposed, and that makes it a little difficult to derive, tedious to derive. But no such difficulty with respect to Lagrange's interpolation formula for shear deformable beam. So we have a generalized, more general theory where we have relaxed one assumption, very crucial assumption, that of ignoring shear deformation completely in case of Euler-Bernoulli beam. So we accommodate shear deformation and we end up with a simpler theory. So doesn't seem right, does it? Do you have some kind of feeling of unease with the whole development, or you are happy with this? Anyone?
So this will be easy.
Yeah?
As compared to previous one, this one is easier.
This one is easier. Okay. Definitely it is easier. The entire development is much easier. Integrals are easier to evaluate. I mean, even the domain integral in weak form, they are easier to evaluate because it's only constant term and linear functions multiplying each other. So the integrands are also simpler to evaluate. But the problem here is, I mean, if it is a general theory, isn't it? This is a more general theory. We are allowing shear deformation. So it is a more general theory, and a restrictive theory should be derived from this. So the results that I get from this formulation should agree with the results of Euler-Bernoulli beam theory in the limiting case where shear deformations are indeed negligible. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So, under what does it mean when I say shear deformations are negligible? What is the condition? So, the condition shear deformation is equal to the difference of slope of deflected shape minus the section rotation. dV by dx minus theta, that is what we are calling, that is what the shear deformation is, right? This is what we are treating as shear deformations, right? So this is shear deformation, dV by dx minus theta. Where did it go? Oh, I went too far back. Yeah. So this is the shear strain, dV by dx minus theta. So total slope of the deflected shape is section rotation plus shear distortion, right? So shear strain is equal to dV by dx minus theta. So in case of slender beam, if I try to model a slender beam where actually shear deformations are negligible, then I need to set this is equal to 0, that is the condition limiting case of negligible shear deformation, right? So let us see what do I have here. Modeling of slender beams by using first order shear deformation theory. Right, so shear deformation is given by dV by dx minus theta. So this should be equal to approaches 0 for slender beams. So that means, what does it represent? dV by dx is equal to theta, right? And what is this? We have approximated, in approximation, finite element approximations for V and theta are V hat x is equal to V1, and let's say it is going to be x minus x2 divided by x1 minus x2 plus V2 x minus x1 divided by x2 minus x1. Okay, I'll just say minus v1, so x2 minus x1, just to make it right. And so this is equal to 1 over x2 minus x1 v2 multiplied by x minus x1 minus v1 multiplied by x minus x2. That is the approximation for transverse displacement. Theta hat is similarly given exactly minus theta 1 x minus x2 divided by x2 minus x1 plus theta 2 x minus x1 divided by x2 minus x1. So this is the beam that we are talking about. Right? So transverse displacement is given as interpolation between these nodal values of V at node 1 and node 2. So V1, V2, linear interpolation, N1, N2. And theta is similarly given. So we have 1 over x2 minus x1 multiplied by theta 2 x minus x1 minus theta 1 x minus x2. Now, that is the finite element model that we have developed, and this is derived from the structure, whatever is the form, mathematical form of the weak form of weighted residual statement. So this is all very rigorous. I mean, we are not doing any kind of operation which is not admissible mathematically, right? So whatever we are doing is a very valid operation in the development of approximate solution. So next, what is the vanishing shear deformation condition? Condition for vanishing shear deformations in case of slender beams. That is, it should be equal to theta. Slope of the deflected shape should be equal to section rotation. Now what is the slope of deflected shape? So I have this one over x2 minus x1 v2 x minus x1 minus v1 x minus x2. This is v hat, right? The approximation, finite element approximation, and this should be equal to theta 2 x minus x1 minus theta 1 x minus x2. So what is, let's carry out this derivative. So this is first order derivative, and we have only linear terms here, x here, x here. So that would be just, as you can imagine, it's a linear interpolation between v1 and v2. So the derivative is going to be simple finite difference. So v2 minus v1 divided by x2 minus x1, and this should be equal to 1 over x2 minus x1 theta 2 x minus x1 minus theta 1 x minus x2. This is the what we call as entire thing. Vanishing shear constraint. Now what are the implications of this? What is this value? V2 minus V1 divided by x2 minus x1. What can you say about it? Is it a constant? Is it a first degree polynomial? Is it a yes? Is it a constant or not? V1 is a constant. I mean, it may be unknown, but it is a value of the primary variable. So it's a value of a transverse displacement at node 1. So it obviously has to be one value. Similarly, x2, V2 is the value of primary variable at node 2. So it is also one value. And what you are referring to is the difference between two values. Right? So there is no variation with respect to x here. Denominator is also constant. These are the coordinates of 2 nodes, node 1 and node 2. So that's just the length of the element x2 minus x1. Right? So what you have here on the left hand side is a constant value. Naturally, if the deformation displacement V is interpolated as a linear polynomial, first degree polynomial, its derivative obviously is going to be constant, and that constant value will be equal to the finite difference between the two endpoints, values at the two endpoints. But on the right hand side, you have section rotations which is interpolated linearly. So we can, let us derive this expression, work it out, what is this right hand side going to be. So we can have x minus divided by x2 minus x1 multiplied by theta 2 minus theta 1, and plus we can have theta 2 x1 minus theta 1 plus theta 1 x2 divided by x2 minus x1. This will be negative. Right? So obviously a constant term on the left hand side cannot be equal to a linear polynomial on the right hand side. So if this vanishing shear constraint condition has to hold, then this coefficient should vanish. Right? The linear term should vanish. Only then we can have equality between this constant term getting equal to this constant term. Right? So then this condition has to vanish. So this has to vanish, and that means theta 2 is equal to theta 1. And when that happens, what do you have here? Theta 2 x1 minus theta 1 x2 divided by x2 minus x1. What is it? So let's say theta 1, theta 2, they are equal. Then we have x1 minus x2 divided by x2 minus x1. So this is equal to minus theta. Right. So we have this condition under this shear deformation, open this thing, vanishing shear constraint. We have this condition V2 minus V1 divided by x2 minus x1 is equal to this will be minus theta, so minus of minus theta is going to be theta. So some constant value theta. Section rotation. Now under what conditions do we have this? Section rotation at the both ends. Section rotation of node 1 should be equal to section rotation of node 2. How is this possible? Right? So the basic idea is you cannot have the constant term. I mean, the shear deformation, when you impose this vanishing shear strength condition, you have this inconsistency of the dimensions. You come up with this problem of left hand side being a constant being equated to a linear polynomial. Right? And this can only hold when coefficient of linear term vanishes. So when this coefficient of linear term vanishes, and those coefficients are essentially the section rotations at the two end points. And that section rotation is of, if it has to take the curvature, then obviously it is of the opposite sign. The curvature, the beam has to bend in this form. So in this case, the section is rotating on this side towards this. In this case, in this end, the section is rotating in this side. Right? So they can never be equal. So what we are referring to here, theta 2 minus theta 1 is equal to 0, they can never happen, they can never be cancelling out if the beam has to deform in a circular arc fashion, like in the pure flexure case, when the section rotations are of opposite sign. So the only way this can happen is when theta 1 is equal to theta 2 is equal to 0. So the beam just doesn't deform, it just remains like this. There is no section deformation. And if theta 1 is equal to theta 2 is equal to 0, that means V1 is equal to V2 is equal to 0. And that means irrespective of what load you apply, no matter what intensity of load you apply, no matter how large magnitude load you apply, the beam would predict zero deformation if the beam is slender. That is, the depth of the beam is small enough to cause this vanishing shear, or when the shear strains are very, very small. So you have a problem. So a general theory, it is a general theory, it can do very well when you are dealing with deep beam problems, as long as dV by dx is not really equal to theta, right? As long as dV by dx minus theta is equal to shear strain, as long as there are some shear strain, tangible shear strains in the body, the formulation will work beautifully, and it leads to simpler formulation as well, as we have seen. But if we think that because it is a generalized formulation, it relaxes the assumption, so it should be able to reproduce the simpler theory, more restrictive theory, then we run into a wall, in the sense that the vanishing shear strain condition requires that the section rotations should be equal at the two ends. And the only way section rotations can be equal, because they have to take the opposite curvatures at the two ends for pure flexure kind of situation. So the only way it can happen is that can be satisfied, that condition can be satisfied, is the sections just do not rotate, they just lock. That's the best they can do, right? So that is the best possible solution under these circumstances. So when theta 1 is equal to theta 2 and they do not rotate, so obviously theta 1, theta 2 is equal to 0, so there is no section rotation, so there is no section rotation, so there is no difference in the slope as well. dV by dx is equal to 0, so V1 is equal to V2, and that will also be equal to 0. So no matter how large deformations, how large a load you apply, the deformations will always be predicted to be 0, and that can be very, very misleading if you are not aware of what is the problem that you have run into. And please note that we have not made any error whatsoever in any of our formulations, right? So what is going wrong here? Now is the time for analyzing this problem. I have presented the problem to you. Now it is the time to diagnose. Diagnosis is, of course, I have given you the diagnosis. Now what is the treatment? We need to find the treatment. Can you suggest something? How can the situation be rectified? Obviously, what we are doing is from the first principles. So such a rigorous procedure should not land us into such a major breach of trust, so to say. The entire foundations of mathematical formulation appear shaky now. Any ideas? Anyone? What can be done to rectify the situation?
So can you take 211 unit 211?
Yes, one solution is just two elements is not going to solve the problem. It will still be flexible shear, it will still be slender beam, and vanishing shear constraint will apply to both the elements. So one way is of course to divide it into a very large number of elements. So one span may be modeled on one span of let's say 3 or 4 meter, may be modeled by let's say thousands of elements. Then you will have that condition where L by D ratio is large enough to admit some significant shear deformation. Right? Then you will probably be able to deal with this situation. See, the problem is vanishing shear constraint, and as long as we are dealing with a slender beam, that constraint will always be there because that comes from the mechanics. Right? The shear deformations are indeed very small, and when you impose that vanishing shear constraint, then there is nothing you can do. This is going to hit the wall. So one way is, as you have rightly suggested, the direction of thought process was right, that we need to create a situation in which shear deformations will not be negligible. So the way to do that is to increase the L by D ratio. So make the beam not slender. Individual element model not a slender beam but a deep beam. So the way, for a given depth, the only thing that you can do is to reduce the length. So you divide the beam into very small length elements. So one span of beam can be divided into a very large number of small beam elements, let's say thousands of beam elements. Then maybe you will land up with a situation in which there are going to be significant shear deformations. But that is of course not sustainable solution. One span being thousands of elements and each element having 4 degrees of freedom. That's too much of an effort to solve a beam problem. Not practical. So what was the 4th C that we discussed when we were discussing the finite element modeling interpolation? Do you remember I mentioned something about consistency, and I said that we will discuss this matter a little later, consistency of finite element approximation. There were 4 C's that are considered as the cornerstone of finite element modeling. One is of course the compatibility, continuity, And completeness, and fourth one was this consistency. So we discussed all the issues regarding completeness, continuity, that is C0 or C1 continuity, what is the order of interpolation, what kind of interpolation model is required, right? And then completeness, you need to model rigid body motion, you need to model constant strain states, and then compatibility, you need to have all the elements adjacent, and the deformation field should be compatible, right? And then fourth one was consistency. And the statement was the finite element approximation should be consistent with the basic mechanics of the problem. And that is what we have run into here. See, in case of vanishing shear condition, displacement and section rotation, so it's essentially, section rotation is same as the slope of the deflected shape. So you cannot have, it is dimensionally inconsistent. If I use displacement as a first degree polynomial and section rotation or the slope of the deflected shape also as the first degree polynomial, that is essentially inconsistent. If dv by dx has to be equal to theta, then v has to be at least 1 degree higher polynomial than theta. Right? And that is what the consistency problem is. So inconsistency of finite element approximation dv by dx theta. So this implies that v x should be interpolated as 1 degree higher polynomial than that used for theta. So it means interpolating v and theta both as first degree interpolation leads to dimensional inconsistency not exactly dimensional inconsistency, I would just say inconsistency in field approximation of the two fields in case of vanishing shear strain constraint. So what is the solution? Interpolate V hat as a second degree polynomial and theta hat as a first degree polynomial. Now how do you generate a second degree, how do you develop a second degree interpolation? You need three function values, 3 points for a second degree interpolation. So that means the element that we need to develop now is we have node 1, node 2 and node 3. Node 1 has 2 degrees of freedom, node 2 has 2 degrees of freedom. So V1, theta 1, V2, theta 2, but node 3 has only 1 degree of freedom, that is transverse displacement. So V hat x is defined as sigma I is equal to 1 to 3 Vi n Vi. N Vi represents the interpolation function corresponding to V, and both of these are NVI, they are second degree interpolation, right? And theta hat x is equal to I is equal to 1 to, or I would just say fine, I is equal to 1 to 2 theta I ni, or n theta I x. So this will be equal to V1, I can write here Lagrange interpolation, x minus x2 multiplied by x minus x3 divided by x1 minus x2 multiplied by x1 minus x3 plus V2 x minus x1 x minus x3 divided by x2 minus x1 x2 minus x3 plus V3 x minus x1 x minus x2 x3 minus x1 x3 minus x2, and this one is going to be theta 1 x minus x2 divided by x1 minus x2 plus theta 2 x minus x1 divided by x2 minus x1, right? So once we have this approximation, then we can have in the case of vanishing shear constraint, that is dV by dx is equal to theta, then we will have linear interpolation, linear polynomial on both sides of the equation, and then there is no problem. So using this, we can go ahead with the same set of same procedure, and we will end up with a 5 by 5 equation. There are now 5 variables for each element, and there will be 5 equations. Of course, these 5 variables can be categorized, and we can actually develop V E E K So we can say that V1 theta 1, V2 theta 2 and V3 is equal to whatever you have here, F E Fi plus QI. These subscripts E and I, they refer to external or the boundary, and I refers to the interior. Right? So this node is at the interior, and this does not participate in the mesh connectivity. So this interior node doesn't really participate in developing the continuity of the displacement field across inter-element boundaries. So this can often be at the element level. This is the element level equilibrium equation. So this can be eliminated by the process of static condensation, and V3 can be eliminated in terms of V1 theta 1, V2 theta 2, and if essentially this process can be derived. I mean, I can write this as V3 is equal to minus KII inverse minus KIE UE plus Fi plus QI. Right? And this can be substituted in this first equation. So this leads to the formulation KEE minus KEI multiplied by KII inverse KIE. So this is the modified stiffness matrix, which will multiply with the degrees of freedom of at the exterior point, the common nodes with other elements, the boundary nodes of the element. And there would be similarly F star. So this is going to be the modified stiffness matrix K hat U, whatever the deformations, nodal deformations, V1 theta 1, V2 theta 2 is equal to whatever modified stiffness matrix, I mean the force vector that will again happen. This will be modified by these contributions that are coming from here. So there would be some modification of the load vector as well. So I can just say hat here. That's all. So again, this 5 equations can be reduced to 4 equations that we are comfortable with, that will correspond, and that will be used for global assembly of equations. And once we adopt this, the interpolation model is consistent with the deformation, the basic mechanics of the problem, and we can, this equation, this formulation now can deal with shear flexible deformation as well as pure flexure problem without any problem. Without any issue, you will never run into the shear locking problem with this model. And that underlines the importance of that fourth constraint, fourth condition, that is the finite element approximations have to be consistent approximation, consistent with the underlying mechanics of the problem. You cannot, I mean, even if you do everything which is a valid mathematical operation, but if you defy, if you kind of violate the basic underlying mechanics of the problem, then obviously the solutions will be absurd. With that, I wind up this discussion on finite elements of one dimension. We will now move on to general continuum modeling, finite elements in 2 and 3 dimensions. Thank you.